Okay, so now we're going to finish chapter 6 on shamanism, the second part of part 4, the Firebringer. The hunting tribes of North America attribute the same shamanistic earth-fashioning deed to their Paleolithic hero trickster. At the time of the Great Flood, we find this ambiguous figure floating on a raft full of animals, bidding them dive to bring up some earth. 3 go down but return exhausted, but then some exceedingly powerful swimmer descends, a loon, muskrat, or turtle, and after a long time, in some of the tales even days, he comes floating to the surface belly up, practically dead, but with a bit of dirt caught in his paw. And then Old Man, Coyote, Raven, or the Great Hare, in whichever character the trickster is represented, removes the bit of mud and, reciting a charm, places it on the surface of the water. The particle increases, growing in 4 days to the present size of the earth. The animals step ashore, and all begins anew. It is hardly proper to call such a figure a god, or even to think of him as supernatural. He is a super shaman, and we find his counterparts in myth and legend throughout the world, wherever shamanism has left its mark, in Oceania and Africa, as well as in Siberia and Europe. In Polynesia, Maui is the trickster. We have already witnessed a couple of his feats. Brer Rabbit has taught us something of his African form, where he is also Anansi, the spider. Among the Greeks, he was Hermes, Mercury, the shapeshifter and master of the way to the land of the dead, as well as Prometheus, the firebringer. In Germanic myth, he appeared as the mischief maker Loki, whose very character was fire, and who, at the time of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, will be the leader of the hosts of hell. We may imagine this trickster hero in his character as Coyote, standing one evening on top of a mountain looking south. Far away he thought he saw a light, not knowing at first what it was. By a process of divination he learned that he was seeing fire, and so making up his mind to procure this wonder for mankind, he gathered a company of companions, fox, wolf, antelope, all the good runners went along. And after traveling a very great way, they all reached the house of the Fire People, to whom they said, "We have come to visit you, to dance, to play, and to gamble." And so in their honor preparations were made for a dance, to be held that night. Coyote prepared a headdress for himself made of pitchy yellow pine shavings with long fringes of cedar bark, reaching to the ground. The Fire People danced first, and the fire was very low. Then Coyote and his people began to dance around the flame, and they complained that they could not see. The Fire People made a larger fire, and Coyote complained 4 times until finally they let it blaze up high. Coyote's people then pretended to be very hot and went out to cool themselves. They took up positions for running, and only Coyote was left inside. He capered about wildly until his headdress caught fire, and then, pretending to be afraid, he asked the Fire People to put it out. They warned him not to dance so close to the blaze, but when he came near the door, he swung the low fringes of his headdress across the fire and ran out. The Fire People pursued him, and he gave his headdress to Antelope, who ran and passed it on to the next runner, and so it went in relay. One by one the Fire People caught up with the animals and killed them, until only one was left, Coyote. And they nearly caught him too, but he ran behind a tree and gave the fire to the tree. Since then, men have been able to draw fire with fire sticks from the wood of trees. This version of the great event is from the Thompson River Indians of British Columbia. The Creek Indians of Georgia and Alabama, some 3,000 miles away, present their trickster rabbit in precisely the same adventure, dance and all, cap a fire, and animal relay, while the Chilcotin, who are considerably north of the Thompson tribes, the hero of the same adventure is Raven, and with the fire cap, the dance, and the animal relay. Still farther north, however, among the Casca, a primitive Athapascan tribe, dwelling on the Arctic slopes of the Rocky Mountains in the farthest reach of British Columbia, the myth takes another turn. Fire, these people say, was held in possession long ago by Bear, who had a fire stone, from which he could draw sparks anytime he wanted. But the people had no fire, for Bear guarded the firestone jealously, always keeping it tied to his belt. One day in his lodge he was laying quietly by his fire when a little bird coming in approached him. The Bear said gruffly, "What do you want?" The little bird replied, "I am nearly frozen. I have come to warm myself." "All right," said the Bear, "come in, but while getting warm, come over here and pick my lice." The guest assented. He began to hop all over the Bear, picking his lice, and while doing so, occasionally picked at the string that fastened the firestone to Bear's belt. And when the string was picked through, the little bird suddenly snatched the stone and flew away. Now all the animals were outside, for they had arranged for the stealing of the fire. They were all waiting in a line, one behind the other. Bear chased the bird and caught up just as it reached the first animal of the line, to whom the firestone had already been passed. And Bear caught this animal just as it tossed the firestone to the next. And so it went right along the line until at last the fire was passed to Fox, who scampered up a high mountain. But the Bear was so tired by now that he could no longer run, and so Fox on top of the mountain broke up the firestone and threw a fragment of it to each tribe. That is how the many tribes all over the earth got fire. That is why there is now fire everywhere in the rocks and in the woods. A glance at the myths of the Andamanese, a race of extremely primitive pygmoid negritos dwelling in a chain of remote islands in the Bay of Bengal, reveals a number of versions of the same legend, one of the most widespread of which assigns the deed to the kingfisher. The fire here was in possession of the most powerful and important figure of the local pantheon, Biliku, a temperamental, feminine personification of the power of the northeast monsoon, alternately malignant and benign, to whom the fashioning of the earth is attributed. And the ancestors having determined to steal her fire at a time when she was known to be asleep, the kingfisher flew silently into her hut one night and took it. But she woke just as he was making away, and hurling a pearl shell, cut off his wings and tail. He dove into the sea and swam to a place called Betrakudu, where he gave the fire to one of the animals, who passed it on to the bronze-winged dove, and the dove turned it over to all the rest. The kingfisher, as a consequence of his accident, however, became a man, while Biliku, in a rage, withdrew her residence from the earth, and has lived ever since somewhere in the sky. The young Nietzsche, in The Birth of Tragedy, contrasted the biblical myth of the fall in the garden unfavorably with what he took to be the typically Greek heroic and tragic myth of Prometheus. The whole mythology of the fall, with its concept of disobedience to a higher power, its serpent's lying misrepresentation, its seduction, greed, and concupiscence, in short, its constellation of what he termed feminine effects, represented for Nietzsche an interpretation of human values that could be termed only contemptuous and contemptible, whereas in the bold impiety of the Greek Titan, representing man's courageous achievement of his own cultural and spiritual stature in defiance of the jealous gods, he saw an essentially masculine worth. Since Nietzsche's day, we have learned that the fire theft is not a specifically Indo-European mythological motif, nor the idea of the fall specifically biblical. However, it is still true that these two represent the poles of the Western world's mythological inheritance. The Greek Titan, a sublimation of the image of the self-reliant shamanistic trickster, who frequently comes off badly at the end of an adventure, is neither condemned in his intransigent defiance of Zeus, nor mocked as a fool by the Greek playwright, but offered rather as a tragic pattern of man's relationship to the governing powers of the natural universe. Whereas the Bible, in its spirit of priestly piety, recognizing equally the tension between God and man, stands on the side of God and breaks not only man's will, but the serpent's too. Prometheus knows what he has done for mankind and shouts it in God's teeth. Men, before he taught them, knew no arts, but in the dark earth burrowed and housed like ants in caves. They had no calendar until he taught them how to know the rising and setting of the stars. He gave them numbers, the arts of writing, farming, and the harnessing of the horse, metallurgy, medicine, divination, yes, and the art even of making sacrifice to Zeus. In the bold play of Aeschylus, Prometheus bound, we hear the ring of that great Titan's defiant challenge. In one round sentence, every god I hate that injures me, who never injured him. Deem not that I, to win a smile from Jove, will spread a maiden's smoothness o'er my soul, and importune the foe whom most I hate, with womanish upliftings of the hands. In contrast, however, we admire no less the proud though humble piety of Job, who, when shown the wonder and power of the power that had dealt with him unjustly, yet made the world, poured ashes on his head. I had heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see thee, Job confessed before his God. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. These two traditions are mixed in the inheritance not only of the West, but of all civilizations, and represent the poles of man's spiritual tension, that of priestly representation of the power that shaped the universe as a force beyond human criticism or challenge, the power that made the sun and moon, the seas, Leviathan, Behemoth, and the mountains, before whom man's proper attitude is awe, and on the other hand, that of the intransigency of the self-sufficient magician, the Titan power of the shaman, the builder of Babel, careless of God's wrath, who knows that he is older, greater, and stronger than the gods. For indeed, it is man that has created the gods, whereas the power that created the universe is none other than the will that operates in man himself, and in man alone has achieved the consciousness of its kingdom, power, and glory. Zeus, it may be recalled, had taken offense when Prometheus had tricked him at the time of the offering of a sacrifice. The Titan, having slain a sacrificial bull, filled the stomach of the beast with meat for himself and his people, wrapping the bones deceptively and attractively in juicy fat. And when he presented these two packaged portions to the king of the gods, bidding him choose the one he desired, Zeus, deceived, took the portion wrapped in fat. Opening which, and finding nothing but bones, Zeus became a god of wrath, and to such an absurd degree that he withheld from mankind the precious gift of fire. Whereupon Prometheus, man's savior, stole it, according to one version, from the workshop of the lame god of fire and metalwork, Hephaestus. But according to another, from the hearth of Zeus himself, and on the summit of Olympus. Prometheus carried with him a hollow stalk of narthex, which he ignited at the blaze, and then, waving the stalk to keep it burning, came back running. Still another version relates that Prometheus plucked his fire from the sun, but in any case Zeus took upon him an extreme revenge, for he caused Hephaestus to nail the boon bringer to the highest summit of the Caucasus, drove a pillar through his middle in the way of a stake, and sent an eagle to eat his liver. What is torn away of the liver in the day grows back at night, so that the torture goes on and on. And yet the punishment presently will end, for, as Prometheus knows, there is a prophecy that one day his chains will fall away of themselves, and the world aeon of Zeus dissolve. prophecy is the same as that of the edict twilight of the gods, when Loki will lead forth the rugged hosts of hell. Then shall happen what seems great tidings: the wolf shall swallow the sun, and this shall seem to men a great harm. Then the other wolf shall seize the moon, and he also shall work great ruin. The stars shall vanish from the heavens. Then shall come to pass these tidings also: all the earth shall tremble so, and the crags, the trees shall be torn up from all the earth shall tremble so, and the crags, that trees shall be torn up from the earth, and the crags fall to ruin, and all fetters and bonds shall be broken and rent. The Fenris wolf shall advance with gaping mouth, and his lower jaw shall be against the earth, but the upper against heaven. He would gape yet more if there were room for it. Fires blaze forth from his eyes and nostrils. The Midgard serpent shall blow venom, so that he shall sprinkle all the air and water. And he is very terrible, and shall be on the side of the wolf. Then shall the ash of Yggdrasil tremble, and nothing then shall be without fear in heaven or on earth. The binding of the shamans by the Haktin, by the gods and their priests, which commenced with the victory of the Neolithic over the Paleolithic way of life, may perhaps be already terminating today, in this period of the irreversible transition of society from an agricultural to industrial base, when not the piety of the planter, bowing humbly before the will of the calendar and the gods of rain and sun, but the magic of the laboratory, flying rocket ships, where the gods once sat, holds the promise of the boons of the future. Could it be possible this old saint in the forest has not heard that God is dead? Nietzsche's word was the first pronouncement of the Promethean Titan that is now coming unbound within us for the next world age, and the priests of the chains of Zeus may well tremble, for the bonds are disintegrating of themselves. Well, that ends chapter 6 on shamanism. Next time we'll begin chapter 7 on the topic of the animal master. Thanks for joining me, and hope you're enjoying the book.